within the next 5 years, everybody is going to have an AI doctor in their pocket. The whole traditional healthcare system is just going to be reshaped forever. And that's how we actually make longevity accessible to everybody. I think you'll live into your 120s, 130s, 140s. I think that'll be completely normal. And here's why.
Nate Graville is the founder and CEO of Geviti, which makes high-end data-driven health optimization accessible worldwide through at-home blood work. So people think when you look healthy and you might feel healthy, that you're totally healthy.
There's no way to know based on just how you feel. You can have elevated markers that are directly correlated to all-cause mortality, essentially. There's literally no reason why you shouldn't be doing routine blood work. There's incentive to keep people sick because big pharmaceutical will profit off of it, and then they'll prescribe the medications and the medications to combat the side effects of their own medications. And it's just this like vicious cycle that's very, very hard to escape. Proactive care is the only way. That is how we take down big pharma. And that starts by basically...
So people think when you look healthy and you might feel healthy, that you're totally healthy. But how does this address the elephant in the room, which is real longevity? What's that all about?
What got me into this space was my father, and he was one of those people that he felt healthy. He assumed, well, I feel fine, therefore I am fine. And this is a tremendously common pitfall that Americans fall into, people around the world fall into. And it's what's even more interesting about that is how we define fine. Like we've just come to accept that living in a constant state of lethargy or just low libido and no desire to do anything is like considered normal, right? And it's just absolutely not normal. And so we have to redefine what fine even means to begin with. But there's a lot of stuff that can be happening under the hood that you're just unaware about unless you go in and look. You can have elevated apolipoprotein B. You can have elevated C-reactive protein. You can have elevated markers that are directly correlated to all-cause mortality, essentially. The risk of dying from whatever it might be. And there's no way to know based on just how you feel. You
or even how you look.
Or how you look.
Yeah, you can have a six-pack and
100%.
Have something under the hood.
I mean, you hear it all the time, unfortunately, way too much. Ultra-marathon runners or just like the craziest athletes dying from cancer, right? Yeah. It's like, that sounds counterintuitive. These are supposed to be the pinnacle of health, right? Mm-hmm. Well, that's not always the case, which is why looking underneath the hood is so crucially important. And in 2025, there's literally no reason why you shouldn't be doing routine blood work. It's so accessible.
Yeah.
It's so affordable. Yeah, that's the only way to know.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like every other part of life, we take our car to a specialist. We have people inspect our homes. We're super proactive with everything else. But then when it comes to the body, we just go, oh, I think I feel fine. But the baseline, what I heard from you, the baseline is so low nationally and maybe even globally, really, that we're just so used to this baseline. Like, what are the 5 or 10 really important markers? Let me ask you an even harder question. Mm-hmm. If you had to pick from the top 10, top 5, what would be the one? What's the one? I'm sorry to back you in the corner off the jump, but like, this is important.
Goodness.
What's the one?
Yeah, I mean, the easy answer is the one that, it's totally dependent on the individual, right? So somebody could have fine, high sensitivity C-reactive protein, but elevated cholesterol markers or triglycerides. That would be the one for that individual. One of the things that we look into a lot is definitely inflammation. So we really look at C-reactive protein, which is indicative of systemic inflammation in your body. And so that's one of the more important biomarkers that we look at. We look at things like apolipoprotein B as well. It's not enough to just look at LDL, bad cholesterol, right? You have to also be looking at apolipoprotein B. You can have totally fine LDL, but if you have elevated apolipoprotein B, it's tremendously problematic. The unfortunate thing is, if you go to your primary care physician generally, and you ask them to do a full panel, they are only going to add to the lab requisition what insurance is going to cover. And generally, they're not looking at these things like C-reactive protein and apolipoprotein B. These are things that are generally added on to the requisition, and insurance oftentimes won't cover these things. So those are a couple big ones. Hemoglobin A1C, fasting insulin, fasting glucose. Those are obviously pretty important as well. You need to make sure that you are sensitive to insulin. You cannot be resistant to insulin. And there's There's lifestyle ways to augment that. There's therapeutics that you can take, supplements, peptides, et cetera. We're really big into peptides. We're really, really big into regenerative medicine as a whole.
I love all these topics. We're going to go deep into each one of them.
Yeah, peptides, stem cells, all of it.
I want to circle back. So the average model is like people pay thousands of dollars a year for just standard healthcare insurance, right? But so many of these plans, I would guess, I'm not a statistician, it's like 75 to 90% of just reactive care. Like there's barely any insurance models where they're like, hey, Nathan, Josh, we're going to make you healthy. They actually make money on the backside of people's disease. And this isn't like a tinfoil hat podcast, although sometimes it feels like it because the truth is very alarming. The truth of where we are now and the tools that we have is ripe to be exposed. We don't have to sit here and go back and forth about how terrible Western medicine and the insurance triad is. We all know, y'all. Everybody knows how terrible it is. The only way, I believe, and I'm curious how you feel, the only way we're going to turn this battleship, Nathan, is if we actually treat ourselves with love and care before the things happen, before the biomarkers under the hood start ringing the alarms. What comes up for you when I say that?
Yeah, I mean, proactive care is the only way. And you're absolutely right. The insurance system is so messed up. They do not like proactive or preventative health. They just do not. So you're right. It's just this constant cycle. The traditional Western medicine system is they want you to be sick because big pharmaceutical will profit off of it, and then they'll prescribe the medications and the medications to combat the side effects of their own medications. And it's just this like vicious cycle that's very, very hard to escape.
Yeah.
Now you can today bypass all of that. At least try, right? By being more proactive about your health and preventative. And that starts by basically measuring yourself in various ways. That could look like blood work. That could look like biometric data from wearables. That could look like a full body MRI. There's a lot of different modalities that allow you to measure yourself really, really well so you can actually see what's happening and be proactive about anything that might be trending towards alarming before it gets there. And this wasn't possible even just 10 years ago, really, unless you had just a ton of resources to expend on this, because 10 years ago is expensive. 20 years ago is millions of dollars to do full genome sequencing, which is like a few $100 today.
Yeah.
So the cost of essentially everything as it relates to preventative and proactive care has come down. Compounds have become more accessible. And there's emerging science that's super supportive of a lot of really, really cool longevity therapeutics that can actually not only enhance your physiology, but can also essentially eliminate a lot of the risk factors with various things that might, ultimately kill us. So
yeah, not to scare anyone, but we're all going to die. We all know this on some level. But how do we increase the lifespan and the health span, really? I've heard this concept, health span. I'm sure you've come across it. Health span is when you're healthy for a very long time. It's not just extending your life. It's making sure that when you're in your 70s and 80s, like for my children and your children, don't we as fathers or mothers out there, don't you just want to be healthy till the very end? It's like, I just want to be next to my lady in bed and just pass away from old age. And the day before I took my kids out to the pool. Like that's the kind of life that we deserve. Yet, when we look at all the different, I guess you could say, hooks of modernity that come in, whether it would be excitatory response, sympathetic driven nervous system, because we're always on screens and social and calendars, or the advent of food chemicals that we're all absorbing and how do we detoxify that? But it really brings the big question, and I know you focus on this a lot, and I'm deep in this right now. I'm super, super excited about emotional epigenetics. Now, the physical epigenetics, the epigenome, and then the epigenetic is the behavior that alters the function of the genome. This is the part that I think really you guys hit out of the park. How do you combine the blood and the epigenetics and the genetics to create a real snapshot of a human being? This is the most exciting thing.
Yeah, so it's very, very hard to find practitioners or coaches or anybody out there who's capable of making sense of all of this data coming in from various sources, whether it's blood work, epigenetic data, biometric data. It's near impossible. There are people out there that are capable of doing so, but they're tremendously expensive.
They've like dedicated their whole life to it. That's all that they do.
That's all that they do. They can only see so many people. They charge hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're out there. They're just tough finds one, and most people can't afford them.
Yeah.
So what we do and what we're building here at Geviti is an AI ML, artificial intelligence / machine learning model that basically ingests all of this relevant health information from various sources and can reason with it and make sense of all of it better than humanly possible. So we don't have to actually go out and find necessarily, a dozen of the best longevity doctors in the world. We can find a handful, basically extrapolate their wisdom, ingest it into this model, have it perform certain functions. And there's a lot of machine learning techniques that we utilize to basically make this model really, really good. And that, I think, is the future. And that's how we actually make longevity accessible to everybody. Whether we can or cannot clone humans, it's highly unlikely that we're going to be able to clone the world's best physicians as it relates to longevity. But what we can do is we can basically extrapolate their wisdom, install it into this model, and this model is relatively cheap to run and operate. We need really talented software engineers and machine learning engineers to actually build and maintain this model. But the job becomes building this really, really robust model that's capable of ingesting a lot of health information from various places and not only making sense of it, but delivering actionable insights to the individual as well in a way that's digestible, in a way that people can understand, and in a way that actually meshes well with people's life.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily want people to become obsessive over longevity. And that's what Geviti is trying to do. We're trying to basically do all of the thinking and the work that needs to take place on the back end and create this sort of plan that's super cohesive with your lifestyle. Something that integrates into your life, not something that just completely alters the way you do your life, unless, of course, you have some unhealthy habits that probably need to be addressed.
Which would show up in the biomarkers.
Sure.
If you're slamming Cheetos and drinking vodka every day, it's going to show up in your biomarkers.
Yeah, and then we also take it a step further. It's not just about basically your physiology. We want to assess your mental health as well. We're trying to basically pull in the full picture as best we can and make sense of all of it. That's how we make longevity accessible. It needs to be AI ML driven. And that's ultimately, I think within the next 5 years, everybody is going to have an AI doctor in their pocket. And
so.
the whole traditional healthcare system is just going to be reshaped forever. Instead of clinicians being being the people who make sense of all of this information, it's going to be AI and machine learning that does it. And clinicians, they're still necessary, right? I mean, the state and federal statutes do not allow artificial intelligence to diagnose and treat patients. It's not allowed. And probably never will be, but who knows? However, what it actually does is it liberates clinicians from basically doing all the mundane, boring stuff that takes a lot of time and it essentially pulls them away from being relational with their patients. And that is why most clinicians actually get into healthcare to begin with. They want to have relation with their patients. They want to actually help them be healthier. And their job sort of will become assessing and analyzing and validating the outputs of this AI ML and appropriately delivering on that information, whatever that looks like.
AI is not just going to transform medicine. It's going to transform everything. People have no idea. I'm in an AI mastermind. People have no idea how fast this is moving. It's literally like, remember when there was the dot-com bubble? Well, I don't know. You're a bit younger, so maybe you were born after the dot-com bubble.
I was a baby, but
okay.
Yeah.
So when you were a baby and there was the dot-com bubble, it was like a gold rush. Everybody was jumping in. It's the same thing right now in 2025 with these LLMs and these agents and all the technology. I'm so excited about it. Like, I don't see doom and gloom at all.
Yeah.
I see it as AI is literally just a massive spreadsheet with, a RAG system, and then it goes in and picks data and serves it out. And the reason it can do it so fast is because we continue to feed it. So AI is not this evil thing. It's actually really beautiful. It's whatever you feed it, that's what you're going to receive.
Definitely. Yeah. And to that point, yes, large language models in particular have gotten really, really good.
And so fast.
So fast. Yeah. I mean, where we're at today, if you would have asked me just a couple of years ago where we'd be at today, it would be nowhere close to where we're at right now. I would have probably thought we'd be where we're at today closer to 2030. But if you look at the rate in which technology across the board is becoming better and better, it's no longer It's no longer this sort of exponential growth pattern. It's almost parabolic, which is just absolutely mind-boggling.
It's just a huge hockey stick going up.
It's vertical. It's just, and there's really nothing to compare it to in history, which is super interesting.
Yeah.
We've never been able to essentially engage in dialogue with another entity who will engage back with reasoning in your language. That's just never happened.
Yeah.
And so, however, the caveat is it's what I call AI bias. People assume that every output is good. If you go to ChatGPT, for example, I would never recommend anybody uploading their blood work to ChatGPT and asking it to analyze. And here's why. There's something that I call AI bias. There's probably a more formal term for it, but essentially, this technology is so revolutionary. People just sort of default to the assumption that everything that it's spitting out is accurate. And you never go and ask an AI generally. Sometimes you might, but you never ask AI a question that you already know the answer to. You're asking a question that you do not know the answer to.
Yeah.
And so you really have nothing to stack it up against unless you take the time to go and do your own research and validate its outputs, which most people do not do. And so if you were to upload your blood work to ChatGPT, it would give a very convincing response. And it might be right in certain facets. It might be totally off base in others. It might be considered harmful in others. And then there's other reasons too. I mean, you're feeding your blood work information, protected health information to a big tech company, and they're free to do whatever they want with it.
Yeah.
They could use it for good. They could use it for harm. They could sell it. They own it at that point. If you feed it into their model, you don't own it anymore. They own your blood work. And so there's that. If you trust big tech, then by all means, but I wouldn't expect a tremendously good output, even though it might be convincing. And the third reason why I probably would not upload my blood work to, or really any of my health information to ChatGPT, or any LLM for that matter, unless it's designed to do this, is LLMs are tremendously powerful, but you need other machine learning techniques as well to actually pull in all the other relevant information and use various like reinforcement learning and other sort of techniques to actually generate a really, really good response. It might be a okay response and it might be very convincing, but there's a good chance also that you don't know how to prompt these models the right way. Let's just say hypothetically, an LLM can get you there. Most people do not have experience with prompting. They don't know how to actually, structure the information as you're typing it in a way where it would properly make sense of all of it. And they don't, this is so new. I think they'll start teaching how to prompt in school. But most people just treat it like they do Google. They ask it a question and expect an accurate response. So those are the three reasons why I want to do that. What Geviti is doing different is, of course, everything's HIPAA compliant. It's all protected. It's all encrypted. You own your data. We don't own your data. We are using, unless you opt out, your data to reinforce and train our models, but you own your data. You can ask us to wipe your data from the servers and we'll do so. We'll never sell your data, of course. We're just basically, the longer you're with Geviti, the more data that we're actually gathering allows us to provide better care for you, essentially. And so it's totally unique and individual to you. And our models are, we're utilizing a lot of the same technologies, large language models. We prefer open source over closed source. Like, for example, instead of integrating into OpenAI's API, we opt for an open source model that we can essentially, retrofit and build off of and manipulate into our sort of use case. But anyway, I digress. Large language models are tremendously powerful. They're really, really cool. But I would be cautious to just trust every output, especially as it relates to your health.
Yeah, I love that you said people don't know how to prompt, because I actually did an experiment. You might love this. I uploaded like 300 journals of my life into GPT. Now, I did put on a setting where I said don't share. I don't know if in the T's and C's they still share it, but I said, hey, don't share this. This is my personal life. And it spit me back literally better information than my therapist. And I was just like, that was the moment for me where I was like, this is going to change the world. So that's an emotional intelligence in psychiatry and psychology. What's really amazing in medicine, and that's near and dear to my heart, is that my mom, ever since I was born, suffered from manic bipolar. And I'm like, wow, if this stuff existed, if podcasting, if AI, if, telehealth, if these things existed, my mom's suffering would have been shortened, very much shortened. Do you reflect on that with your father leaving his physical form? I know he's never gone. I know you're connected to him still. His physical form is gone. He's still with you. But gosh, do you, is part of why you created this? And also, do you reflect upon the timing of this technology being available and how powerful that could have been to maybe save his life?
Yeah. So let me just provide some context. One, my worldview. I think that's important for me to establish. I'm a Christian. I believe in God, Jesus Christ. That's my worldview, irrespective of others. But the reason why I bring that up is because I do believe that my father is still, somewhere. He did not just cease to exist.
Yes, agreed.
And so, yeah, I definitely still feel, that sort of connection and desire to obviously build something that honors him. That's what got me here in the first place. My father was, again, one of those people who he did everything right on paper, minus one crucial thing, which was going in and looking underneath the hood, right? So he ate generally well. He got his steps in every day. He trained 4 or 5 days a week. He did all of the right things. He lived in Old Town Scottsdale, and him and my stepmother, they would always walk the canals there. They were active. They were not living this sort of hermit lifestyle. He wasn't an attorney. He wasn't an entrepreneur. He didn't have this, high stress. And so it was super out of left field when we found out he was dying from cancer. He was doing everything right. And it's super unfortunate because if a product like this had been available just years before, and he, of course, assuming he was a subscriber to it, I think he'd still be with us today.
Yeah.
It's in my story is tremendously common. My father, he started experiencing this back pain. That's how we found out he had cancer. And the traditional healthcare system failed him so miserably. It is terrible how poorly the traditional healthcare system handled his situation. He was just dismissed left and right by everybody. And he'd go in, I have this lower back pain. Oh, it's fine. Go to a chiropractor, go to a masseuse, go get it worked out. And he did all that stuff, and it kept getting worse and worse and worse until eventually, finally, somebody was like, okay, yeah, let's take a look. Let's run some labs. Let's do a CT, an MRI. Let's go and see what's happening. And by that time, it's probably 6 months have passed from when he first started experiencing the symptoms to when he actually went in to look. And it was cancer that had spread from his lungs up his back to his brain. It was everywhere by that point. And it was too late. It was too late. We tried fighting it. We did everything we could. And another way that the traditional healthcare system failed us was this was during the height of COVID. So hospitals were crazy. It was hard to see anybody. If you had somebody there, it was hard to go in and actually be with them. And so the hospital gave us a dilemma. And it's horrible that they did this, but they essentially told us, hey, your father's going to die. We can take him upstairs and keep him alive a little longer, but he's not going to get better. He's going to die. The caveat is if we take him upstairs and keep him alive a little while longer, you're not going to be able to go up there with him because COVID rules don't permit anybody to be on that floor. No visitors. Or alternatively, we can take him to the hospice, and at least there he'll be more comfortable. And he's going to die there within the next 48 hours. And so this was a decision that the hospital, gave us, forced us to make. And it's just terrible that even if it was a 1% chance, a greater probability of him surviving if he went upstairs, that we wouldn't be able to be with him in those moments. And almost forcing us to go the hospice route. And ultimately, I was there with him till his last breath, holding his hand till his last breath. He was listening to worship music. He was going out faithfully. And I was with him when he went away. And, it's obviously a sad, very sad thing, but it's also a very beautiful thing as well when you get to actually be there and know that they weren't alone in that. And yeah, it's hard because physically my father is gone, but it doesn't necessarily feel like that, especially building Geviti, because Geviti is my way of honoring him and ultimately hopefully, if it's just even one person, Geviti was a huge success, ultimately preventing people from experiencing what I experienced.
Yeah.
And that's why I got into this. I had sold a small little tech company in early 2021, around the time we found out my father had cancer. He ended up passing away September 8th, 2021. It was very clear I had to get into this space. I had to get into longevity. And
Was it a moment where it just hit you in the heart?
yeah, I think it was.
What was
yeah, it wasn't crystal clear. I started doing research into the space. I started doing research initially on what sort of testing options were available. Even just going to your primary care physician and asking for a full panel, what all is that actually looking at? And come to find out, it's just not looking at that much. I mean, everybody knows that now, yet people still go and do it. I say everybody knows that now, but unfortunately, that's actually not true. Everybody in our world does, but we live in an echo chamber.
We live in a bubble.
Mm-hmm.
So with respect, I'll just interrupt you here.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of emotional processing that's needed, it seemed like it gave you clarity on how you were going to be in honor to his life. Mm. The anger that people feel when they go through an experience like you have in your whole family, that anger, on the other side of that anger is the acceptance to change and maybe even the power to change the environment so it doesn't impact other people. Mm-hmm. How did you personally work through that emotional ladder, and how have you shifted the grief process into sadness and heaviness into service? How did you do that?
Dude, that's an amazing question. So for even more context, my father passed away just a couple months after I got married to my wife. And then a few months after that, we found out we were pregnant. So just, 3 of my life's biggest moments condensed into about 6 months span.
That's a rough Bronco ride.
Yeah, it was. It was an emotional roller coaster.
Yeah.
It was the highest highs and the lowest lows, and a lot to process. Up until that point, just like too many people are, I was a little dismissive of therapy, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And
talk therapy per se?
Yeah.
Or just any therapy?
Just honestly, any therapy. And it was just uninformed. I wasn't really, I had an experience when I was younger. My parents got divorced when I was really young, and I had a bad experience. I was a kid, so I don't even know how bad the experience really was, but it turned me off to therapy. Well, I started talking to a therapist, after all this happened, and that right there, just the ability to decompress and frankly, be completely vulnerable with somebody is just so healing. Mm-hmm. Being able to actually even just let the words roll off your tongue instead of just keeping it all tucked away inside is so healing. And so I think talking to a therapist was crucial. And I've made that routine in my life, especially in this season. Geviti it's growing. It's growing faster than we thought it would grow, which is really, really cool. But even more need for therapy, navigating all of the emotions that come with that.
Man, thanks for sharing. That's awesome. I really love this because, on the screen right now, y'all, is the wellness pentagon: mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, financial. And those are the ways that I believe for our community that we feed ourselves. But at the bottom is physical. The brain, the soul, everything exists in the body. So if we're not looking at the body first as like the starting place, then it's really impossible actually to fill the other sides of our health, to nourish ourselves. And I can only imagine how not just your story is a micro of the macro. And the macro is that very sadly, this is happening to hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, especially in North America, and then probably, hundreds of millions in the world. Because this model of reactiveness is so broken and is so old-fashioned. And it was built upon, if you look, in the early 1900s, if you want to go down that rabbit hole, y'all, go ahead and look at how the medical system actually was formed. If you really want to get deep on it, I think the medical system is great at fixing a broken leg, or a shoulder issue, or when there's really like injuries and trauma to the physical body. But this massive gap that continues to get wider and wider and wider is someone's wholeness care, holistic care. And I do believe, I wonder how you feel about this, I do believe in my heart of hearts that the same amount of money, if not more, is available to these companies and to these physicians if we shifted it to proactive care. Do you feel the same? I think there's more abundance on the other side.
Yeah, I don't know if I feel the same necessarily.
How so?
I think that reactive care is highly profitable. And I think that's why there's incentive to keep people unhealthy, frankly. That's why there's incentive to ensure that our food supply is so bad here in America. There's incentive to get people to buy drugs. That's the only way these big pharmaceutical companies are going to operate. So as a byproduct, there's incentive to keep people sick. There's less incentive to make people healthy because they're going to escape this profitable loop that traditional Western medicine keeps you in.
Yeah.
And so it's this profit machine, the traditional Western medicine system, that is so profitable. I mean, it's like a too big to fail profitable.
You think it's too big to fail? At least at our current point of consciousness.
Air quotes, I don't think anything's too big to fail.
Yeah.
I think God has shown blessing on this country with sparking the Make America Healthy Again movement.
Yeah,
and
Maha is where it's at.
Yeah, and just the attention that's drawing to this space is tremendous. So I think it starts with people. People need to open their eyes. More people like you need to start shouting from the rooftops the truth of the matter. More people in America still believe that traditional Western medicine is like the only way.
Yeah.
It's this false sort of ideology that your doctor owns your health. Your doctor doesn't own your health. They're not walking in your shoes. You shouldn't expect your doctor nor want your doctor to own your health. You have to own your health. And I think if you just sort of shift that paradigm, and everybody has to get there, in their own way. Mm-hmm. I'm sure a lot of people through listening to your podcast have gotten there through things that you've said. I think more of that needs to happen, and that is how we take down big pharma, big medicine. I call it legacy medicine. Mm-hmm. But yeah, obviously being in the space, it's less profitable to keep people healthy. But we need altruistic founders who honestly are just like, hey, we need to be profitable enough to be solvent enough to make this accessible to everybody.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we're doing at Geviti. It's really not about how can we maximize profits and dollars and all of that stuff. If my investors are listening, they're probably, not thrilled about that. But I also think that's what sets us apart. And, that's what sets us apart from a lot of our competitors or people in the space. We are definitely not profit first. We're people first. We truly, truly do. We're invested in the lives of every single person who comes to Geviti. And I think people get that sense, which is why they stay. People just don't leave when they come. Mm. And that's really cool to see. But we also go as far to, if you look at even the proactive and preventative space, there are people marking up the cost of drugs, prescription therapeutics that are tremendously beneficial, things like peptides, hundreds of percent. It's ridiculous. It's like that's out of the playbook of the traditional Western medical system. Why are we doing that over here? This is supposed to be a big middle finger to the traditional Western medicine system. And yet we're pulling from their playbook, and that bothers me. So we don't do that. We have like a small fulfillment fee. I think that's all we charge. But then we pass through the cost of whatever it is that goes to the individual. And I think that's important. If we look at like one of our peptides that a lot of our members like is sermorelin or sermorelin. Uh-huh. It's a growth hormone releasing hormone peptide or a growth hormone secretagogue. And it essentially stimulates your pituitary and tells it to secrete more growth hormone. And, that's beneficial for a lot of reasons, especially as we age. Well, we've got some people selling that for, $500, $600, $700 for a 3-month supply. And we're selling it from the same exact pharmacy for the cost that we get it at, which is like a couple $100. And it's just like there's a huge spread between getting it through us and getting it elsewhere. And really, honestly, it's not about the numbers. The numbers don't bother me. It's not like, oh, they're making a profit over here. We're not. It's just like, hey, we are supposed to be in the industry of having people's best interests. We want to make this accessible to everybody. We don't want to make this exclusive to middle class plus, people. We want even lower class people to be able to have access to these therapeutics. It's necessary. This is our industry is a little dose of altruism, but we even need more altruism in our industry specifically.
Yeah, you know why? Because John Mackey wrote a book, the founder of Whole Foods here. There's the headquarters downtown in Austin, and it was about conscious capitalism. And I love this because let's be real, man. Capitalism is, to what I can see, the best system that exists out there, right? Sure. At least right now in our level of development in humanity. But wielding consciousness from greed or unconsciousness is just going to bring forth more pain and more unconsciousness. In other words, it's like Alan Watts says, it's all retch and no vomit. We just raise our kids to raise their kids to raise their kids to do the same thing. So I really love what you're talking about here because there's a metaphysical aspect to this. You brought up your faith, and I also believe there's a God. Actually, I connect with God every day. And I don't think of God as a bearded man in the sky. God is a relationship. And so to really have a relationship with God, it requires honesty of self. So if I have honesty of self and I'm putting things out in the world that I believe in, and I check in with my integrity and I'm not undermining someone else or taking advantage of someone else, then I can go sleep with my lady and hang out with my kids and feel good. How much do you think in your own life and also in people's lives that come to Geviti are dealing with just a lack of honesty, that are actually lying to themselves, and that's what drives psychosomatically their disease?
Interesting question. Yeah. To your point, yeah, that's like the biblical principle of you reap what you sow, or,
Sure.
do unto others what you want to be done to you, essentially, right? So, and that's a universal truth, no matter whether you choose to subscribe to biblical principles or otherwise. That's, you can't refute that is the way the universe works.
That's right.
That's a way reality has been hardwired. And so, yeah, to your question, I'm sure a lot of it.
I think an overwhelming majority, because it's a constant sympathetic nervous system response. We have people that are just hooked up to stress all day long because they're leading a life that's not really theirs. They're not in alignment with themselves. They have no connection to God. And then they get really sick.
Yes.
I think this is a huge part of just even being interested in biomarkers, because then that mental leads to the spiritual, leads to the physical. They're back and forth.
Yeah. I think before this podcast, I had mentioned we were talking, and I think what it comes down to is a misalignment in priorities, ultimately. America has this tendency to basically put money over everything. I mean, capitalism is the best. Don't get me wrong. It's the best way.
So far, it's the best.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. It's the only way due to human nature that I think works. And however, we basically live to work. We basically live to work in a career. We live to work until we're 65 so we can retire and die 10 years later. That's essentially what life is in America, unfortunately. And that's the American dream. That's not the American dream they sell, but that's what the reality is.
It's actually the American nightmare for me. I would never want that. And I don't think anybody here wants that.
Yeah, and it's a tough reality. But I think if you reshape your priorities and you don't live your life to make a buck, money's not a bad thing, right? And making money it's necessary. It's a tool that allows us to invest in our health, invest in our relationships, and utilize to actually better our health. But when it becomes the primary goal of my life is to ensure that my bank balance is, in the however many figures, there's right out of the gate a misalignment in priorities. And so I think starting with sort of realigning your priorities, where God is above everything, family second, and then work third is the best place to start.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's just people out there that will always be sort of misaligned, and that's an unfortunate truth. But I think a lot of sort of the issues that when people come to Geviti that they're dealing with are definitely related to a misalignment in priorities, and that causes you to not prioritize very important things like your health, which should be like above most things, ultimately.
Yeah, I resonate with what you're saying on such a deep level. And I think about this, to go back to what we talked about earlier, your biological age versus your health span. Like, in other words, how long are you living healthy versus how long are you just living? And for me, it was really cool. So full transparency, y'all, I did the Geviti process, which is so cool. They come to your house, you get to pick the time. I don't have to drive to the doctor's office. This is amazing. Like, literally the most time-saving thing. And then I saw on my dashboard, I'm 37 years old biologically, which is so cool because I'm 44.
Nice.
So I'm like way younger
Man, you look
biologically.
great for 44.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a decade here. So, and then before that, I was a trainer for 10 years. So I've been in the health world for 2 decades, really, which is cool to say. I'm like, I can't even believe I'm here. Yeah. But what I'm getting at is like, can you extrapolate this more? Because this is really big. And I love how this is part of the ecosphere that y'all have. It's one thing to get a blood test, but then what do you do with it? And then also, how do you know how old you really are on a cellular level, on a physical level, versus just your chronological age? Can you expand that?
Definitely. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. There's a lot of really good diagnostic solutions out there. There's more and more coming into the marketplace every single day. You hear Function Health is huge, right? And honestly, we're a fan of companies like Function. We actually are. If that is your way of going and getting blood work done and looking underneath the hood, by all means. Like we want it to be Geviti, of course, but what we do different than most is it doesn't stop at sort of this extremely comprehensive blood work. We're looking at roughly 100 biomarkers. We've just added more to our panel as well. So whenever your 6-month free blood work comes up, it'll have more blood work biomarkers that we're looking at. Anyway, it doesn't stop with our very extensive at-home blood work. We also provide the actionable insights and what to do with that information. When you sign up for Geviti, you have a care team in your pocket. You have a dedicated health coach, you have a care coordinator, and you have a licensed practitioner. Basically, people who you can access to for various things, whether it's nutritional advice or whether it's mental health, whether it's, hey, my testosterone is tremendously low. And of course, they would go over this with you. But maybe I'm going to try out enclomiphene citrate or HCG or testosterone replacement therapy or something like that. Or maybe Shilajit or some sort of supplement to try to increase your testosterone. So we have this team in your pocket that you can access pretty much whenever you want, right? I mean, your medical provider isn't going to just be on the other side waiting for you to reach out. They're meeting with patients, of course. So to manage expectations, it might be a few hours, but
that's pretty good.
Yeah, no, it is. It's really good. You've got this team in your pocket essentially, and other people just aren't doing that. Even if they're marketing that they are, it's just not necessarily the case. You might have to reach out through email and wait to get an email response or something like that. So, and then we're also pulling in. I don't know if you've updated your app lately, but we're pulling in biometric data from your wearables. And so what's really cool is that's getting fed to our model, of course. But also our care team is able to analyze that as well. So if let's just say you're prescribed a supplement and we're actually able to go in and see how that is impacting your sleep patterns. So we don't have to guess, and we don't even have to take your word for it necessarily. We can just actually go in and look to ensure that we are giving the best advice possible and providing the best care possible. And so biological age testing, there's many different ways to test your biological age. Like there's multiple generations of tests, and one isn't necessarily better than the other. They're just different, right? The original way of assessing biological age was by measuring the length of your telomere, which, as we know, is essentially the end cap on your mitochondria. It's just like the little plastic tip on the end of your shoelace, essentially. And as you age, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller until eventually you're dead. And so that's not a bad way of assessing biological age, actually. It's just one way. There's methylation tests or epigenetic tests that you can do to assess your biological age or see the rate in which you're aging, which is like the new generation test.
What does that look like, the epigenetic test?
Yeah, it's usually a buccal swab. A little cheek swab.
Yeah.
Ours is considered an epigenetic test as well, but we just extrapolate it from your blood. So we're using, in your application, the default biological age that we're showing is actually what is called the PhenoAge test, which is clinically validated. We didn't make this up. We let the scientists do that, and we just offer it to people. And it's essentially pulling in specific biomarker information and running it through this algorithm to spit out a biological age. And it's not the end all be all, but it is indicative of basically where you're trending. Are you aging faster than you should be or slower than you should be?
Yeah.
Slower than you should be, I guess there isn't such a thing, but Yeah, biological age some people view it as a vanity metric. We don't. We view it as a way to quantify whether or not our protocols are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. As a way to quantify that, hey, your investment in Geviti is actually paying off. You are slowing down the rate in which you're aging. And biological age testing is really, really cool, especially when you find out I'm 44, but my biological age is 37.
Yeah, that's a plus. I would have been bummed if it said 50.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's a good wake up call.
Sure.
We've obviously had people who were disappointed in that, but then their 6-month blood work comes back around and they're no longer biologically older than they were.
So even if that boot, or even if the telomere had shortened, just based on the rest of their biomarkers in the algorithm, you could tell like, hey, a year ago you were, 5 years older than your age, but now you're actually your age or less. You can do that?
Yeah. So we're not necessarily, increasing we're not increasing your telomere length again. We're not.
Right. You can't rebuild it again, or can you?
Well, there is research that suggests you can. It's very early stage and there's no concrete evidence whether or not you can. There's supplement companies out there selling supplements that claim that they can increase the length of your telomeres, but not clinically validated. So whether it can or cannot be done, not sure yet. But it's just a different type of test what we're looking at than the telomere length test. So what's really cool is you can also reverse your biological age relatively quickly by just installing very, very basic lifestyle interventions, by sleeping properly. Sleep is like super important. It's one of the most important things, if not the most important thing. Prioritizing your sleep. Ensuring that you're sleeping not just enough, but your sleep cycles are optimal as well, will definitely do wonders as it relates to reversing your biological age.
I'm with you. We had Dr. Kirk Parsley. He's a Navy SEAL, retired sleep doctor, works with the SEALs. And he would literally get these guys that were in their 20s and they had levels of testosterone of men in their 60s. The lowest testosterone you could ever imagine. And instead of just pumping him with medication, he would be like, all right, well, let's actually see what's going on with your sleep. Let's see if your lymphatic system is actually clearing the waste product from your brain. Let's see what's going on with your metabolites and your whole metabolic system. And he would get them on very simple protocols. None of it actually was medical drugs. This is the most amazing thing. He would actually give them supplements, things from nature, right? Imagine that. Nature is smart. Nature always wins. And then they would turn it around in like 6 to 12 months and their panels would be all increased. But see, he couldn't have done that if these panels didn't exist. The panels have existed, like you said, for a long time. But now there's something so exciting that I want to ask you next. The panels that we have now and the accuracy of these panels, it's not that it's just one lab in America that's doing it all. There's multiple labs. How did you figure out what lab you're going to use? And how did you really feel intuitively that they were going to be the most accurate? Because people can send tests to 2 labs. Sometimes the results come back. Have you ever had people ask you this question? Like, how'd you choose the lab and how'd you make sure it was accurate?
Yeah, no, I don't think I've been asked this question, but it's obviously something that we talk a lot about internally. We work with many labs, right? So we're not a lab. We don't want to be a lab. We want to partner with the best labs. We want to stay in our lane and provide really good solutions and services and build really cool technology that basically allows people to live longer, healthier lives.
You don't want to wear a lab coat and a face shield?
I'm not equipped for that. Okay. No, not my personality either. No, but yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there. For like our standard blood work, we call it standard blood work, but it's not so standard. We're using big labs where there's a lot of them around the country, like LabCorp or Quest, which are the 2 biggest. There's several thousand of those locations across the country. So what we can do is we can essentially get a phlebotomist to come out to your house and draw your blood. And instead of having to go and purchase dry ice and package this up and ship it back to a central lab, which is something that we've talked about, and we just haven't basically been able to justify that logistically, we can just go drop it off at a LabCorp or Quest and ensure that those samples are actually not, on an airplane and nothing is happening to them, and they're properly stored and they're not waiting a long time before they actually go to the lab. Now, we also work on the specialty testing side with 5 or 6 other labs as well. So, for example, Genova Diagnostic Solutions is one of the ones that we work with. Cell Science Labs. There's a handful of other labs that we work with, Advanced Diagnostic Solutions. They have really, really cool tests doing various different things. We, for example, offer a GI map to assess gut microbiome or gut health. We do Dutch testing, which is widely popular, sex hormones, adrenal function, all of that stuff. We're introducing a methylation test. So just to see sort of where your, methylation, what your genetic predisposition is towards actually being able to like methylate. Various other things that are important. I wouldn't necessarily say they're more important than the blood work that we do, but it is in your best interest to know. It's in your best interest to know whether or not you can actually methylate, for example.
I have the MTHFR SNP, and so does my lady, and I'm assuming my children do. We haven't done the testing yet. This is like, I was on a panel last year with Sean Wells, a friend of mine, and he's a specialty supplement, world's greatest formulator. And I said on the stage, based on my research, it's about 30%. And he's like, it's actually more closer to 40. So it's like if 30 to 40%, and that's just people that have been polled, that's just data sets. Imagine how many people aren't reporting to the data set. It's probably a lot more. It might even be half of us that are poor methylators. And then obviously as we age, we just methylate poorly because that's just a byproduct of aging. Can you go into that a little bit? This is something that people don't know, they don't even know. And really you can only get this from a test. You can't just intuitively guess like, oh yeah, I have the MTHFR snippet. It's not going to work. Yeah. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah. At a relatively surface level, essentially there's things that you could be ingesting. If it's not in the right form, it's just pointless. It's not going to work. It's not going to actually convert into what it needs to convert into if you're not able to methylate, right? So operating under the assumption, similar to what you just said, that most people or a high majority of people have trouble with methylation or methylating, we just always opt to use the methylated versions of whatever we are essentially offering as it relates to vitamins, minerals, et cetera. We're also offering a patented chelated form, so it's actually absorbed, it's more bioavailable. A lot of supplements are not bioavailable. A lot of supplements are not bioavailable. They're just not in the right form to be bioavailable. Basically, you ingest them and they're competing, basically, as they enter your gut, they're competing to bind to specific receptors. And that competition doesn't allow for them to be widely bioavailable. So actually, most of the supplements that we offer are actually processed as protein. So they bind to protein receptors. And that actually allows them to be more bioavailable. And that's the way supplementation should be done. I'm seeing a trend more towards that as well, which is promising. The way supplementation is generally done, not to get off topic here, but in America, you're scrolling through social media and somebody on Instagram who is paid by a company to give a promotion is like, hey, you need to be taking this. It'll change your life. And so you don't even buy from that company sometimes. You go to Amazon and find the cheapest version of that.
Yeah.
And then you're running into a whole other slew of problems that may take place. Like, is this even what it claims to be? And that's the way that supplementation is done generally in America. The way it should be done, the way that we do it is we actually go in and look underneath the hood and assess what your body is actually asking for. What do you actually need? Also, not just that, but what are your goals? What are your goals? Are you trying to become, an extreme athlete, or are you trying to moderate a pretty stressful lifestyle? What are your goals? So that's obviously factored in, and we use this real health data to formulate what we call your longevity blend, which is AM and PM packets designed for you. Super convenient. You just rip off a sachet, put it in your pocket. I take my AM at the office in the morning. I leave my PM at home so I can eat it with my dinner. And it's completely data driven. I know that I'm taking exactly what I need to be taking. Most of the time, supplementation, when you're just buying whatever you think that you need to be buying because an influencer or maybe somebody you trust told you, hey, I'm taking this and it changed my life. That might be totally true. Maybe it did change their life.
For their biochemistry.
Right. But you might just be, passing it down the toilet. Like literally, you might be, pissing it away. And so, supplementation needs to be data driven in our belief. And at the very least with us, our supplements are coming from a pharmacy as well, which is, I think, important. So you can there's assurance that they are using the highest quality control standards available, essentially here in America. They're adhering to FDA regulations and every sort of governing body that's relevant, and doing things right. So it's we really like, and our members really like our longevity blend as well.
I'm so glad you said that. One of my friends, Mark Effinger, he's the CEO of Newtopia, and he's like, yeah, our quality control process showed that we would get this palette of raw ingredients, and it would be like 30 to 40% of what they said was in there, because it just sat on a dock in China and then it got shipped over, or wherever it came from, Russia. The reason that there's no regulation on this stuff is because none of these supplements can claim to cure or treat a disease. And I understand that. But also, there just gets to be some kind of governance. I don't even care if it's like within the supplement industry itself, where we can just get rid of the people that are poisoning the well, if you know what I mean. That's a really big problem, actually. And I'm glad you talked about this, because I don't think people understand that when they're paying money, they're throwing probably 60% of their money in the toilet, literally and figuratively. They're just wasting their money. So like, it makes perfect sense to use a data set or a dashboard to be like, okay, who am I really? Who am I really on a cellular level? What's really going on with my hormones? And how can I actually have this data set work for me? And this is the good side of technology. Like I'm a huge proponent of technology being something that can heal us. How do you approach the conversation when you have the naysayers that are like, oh, I don't want my data here, and I don't want technology to help me, and just this adverse reaction to technology, because what they say is, well, it's not natural. My body should know exactly what it should do itself, and I don't need these external frameworks of accountability. How do you talk to people through that?
Yeah. In our experience, it's more of a generational thing. I think
it's more the boomers.
Yeah. I think the boomers are less inclined to trust technology as much as maybe younger generations are. It makes sense as to why that is.
Sure.
And whether your body, knows or doesn't know what it needs, it actually always does know what it needs. You still got to go in and look. It's not going to just, in a little voice in the back of your head say, oh, I need some magnesium L-threonate. It's just not going to do that. You need a way to extrapolate relevant information to actually hear what your body is saying. It's not speaking to you in human language necessarily. So if you're a little worried about like the technology component, I guess like what I do is I just assure them a few things. One, you own your data. We don't own your data. Two, we have to adhere to the strictest, most secure standards in the industry. Of course, it's all HIPAA compliant, SOC 2, all of it. Everything is highly encrypted. Everything is stored on highly encrypted, secure databases.
Yeah.
So in terms of like privacy and security, everything's buttoned up as best as it possibly could be.
I think it's more of an ego thing, actually. Like you said, it's just a generational mentality. But you're in your 20s, I'm in my 40s. Like I was born in 1980, which is like I'm 1 foot in each generation. I'm like the last year of mine and the first year of the next one. So you're a digital native, like you were born into technology. So I think when we look at the mental hurdle that's actually self-imposed, it's self-created by the boomers, I would just like to say, and I wonder what you might say, technology is a form of human evolution because it comes from creativity, right? And we're blessed with creativity because we're made from God. We're made from that which created us. And I think it's so powerful to just have a discernment, have a healthy skepticism, but not an unhealthy skepticism to progress. I don't think progress just for progress sake is good, but the closed-mindedness, I think, is not just in that generation, maybe just people that have the training or the parenting that says nature and natural is the only way. You don't need supplements. Like this kind of conversation, I think, can be really harmful for people.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, technology is really at its core just a harness on what already does exist in a sense, right? So it's more, a lot of people, for example, let's take the LLM, view it as this new invention, but it's really not this new invention. It's just a means of gathering and producing what already has existed, essentially, right? So it's just a tool that we've sort of built to basically take relevant data and do stuff with it and produce outcomes with it that help people. And so, It's definitely not even going against nature to utilize technology. You're not creating anything that hasn't necessarily already existed in its most core form already. We're not creating new matter when we're building technology. We're just creating a means to actually harness it and basically manipulate it to perform certain tasks, which is really, really cool. If there's skepticism, it's generational generally, and it's totally self-imposed. But it's also understandable. There has been, in many industries, situations where technology has been used maybe not for good or has been taken advantage of. So, but in 2025, you can't avoid it. You've got to get with it.
Well, most of these boomers, if not all of them, are either on TikTok, Snapchat, they're all there anyways. Yeah. And so if they ever looked at the terms and conditions of these platforms, they would be like, I'm not using this anymore. I mean, they literally track our eye movements, how long we're on a feed post, every click, every like, every comment, everything goes into this massive silo that's buried like a football field under the ground. So I want to flip this then. The peptides are really fascinating to me. And I actually played around in the past with tirzepatide. Semaglutide, which we all know, what's the medical term for semaglutide, the popular
Ozempic or Wegovy?
Ozempic, yeah. Ozempic, but tirzepatide is really interesting. So is the Semarelin that you talked about. The peptide conversation is awesome because our body already makes it. This is actually not fabricated from a place that's not nature. All of these peptides exist in our physiology in the first place. Can you provide clarity on that? Because I think the peptide conversation is it brings up a little bit of animosity in the space. There's people that even in the Czech world and the holistic world, they're like, oh, it's not natural. You shouldn't do TRT. You shouldn't do peptides. And I'm like, if it makes me live happy and healthier and longer, why the hell not? Why would I let my ego get in the way of that?
Yeah. Peptides are tremendously powerful tools. Peptides are really, really cool. They're totally natural, by the way. So basically at its base level, a peptide is a chain of proteins, short proteins. So usually it's a chain of 2 to 50 proteins that are sequenced in a very particular way to perform a very particular function. And it's highly important that they're sequenced exactly the way they should be to carry out that function. So for example, the sequence of BPC 157 and sermorelin, they look totally different. They're both peptides. They're both chains of proteins, chains of amino acids strung together to carry out specific tasks. What these peptides do is they bind to the surface of your cells, receptors on the surface of your cells, to essentially trigger responses. They flip switches.
So they're just messengers.
They're just messengers. That's right. That's a great way to phrase it. And so let's take BPC 157. For example, it's a string of proteins, of course. It flips a switch, basically allows for better tissue repair and angiogenesis. So essentially the new formation of basically blood vessels. And so you're able to actually send more nutrients and oxygen to areas of in your body that have inflammation and need healing.
Would that include ligaments and tendons as well?
For sure. Yeah. Okay. And so we like BPC 157 a lot. Unfortunately, the FDA does not like peptides. They don't like stem cells. They don't like anything that is a threat to Big Pharma. We all know why. It's because these things work and they work tremendously well and they're safe and effective. Their efficacy is high. Their safety profile is near perfect. It's not always perfect. And so I'll touch on that here in a second. There's growth hormone releasing hormone peptides like sermorelin or tesamorelin or hexarelin or ipamorelin. There's a lot of those, and those are also amazing. Essentially, what that's doing, it's a different sequence of proteins that are strung together. Proteins, natural, they're already existing in your body. It'll bind to a receptor that'll essentially tell your pituitary to secrete more growth hormone. And it won't ever secrete into a supraphysiological range. If you inject, let's say, exogenous growth hormone, you can get into a supraphysiological range, and that's where a lot of harm can happen. That's where you can start actually growing the size of your heart and your organs and cancer if you have it and all these things. And so peptides are really awesome because it's actually just enhancing what your body already knows how to do. And so it's essentially just a little biohack that allows you to be optimal at performing said function, a very specific function. Now, where peptides can be problematic is if you buy them from a website, a research chemical company, not from a pharmacy. And here's why. A few reasons. These peptides need to be sequenced in a very exact way. If one protein is out of line, it can be extremely problematic. And so these research chemical companies, for all you know, you're getting it from a garage. Even if they have a great facility, there's no quality control measures. There's no governing body that enforces any sort of regulation. And so if one of these proteins is out of sequence, a lot of harm can happen. At the very least, you're probably going to have some sort of, reaction, whether it's like a rash or, brain fog. It could go as extreme as activating a cancer pathway or suppressing your immune system. And so you do not want to buy peptides from research chemical companies for that reason. Additionally, research chemical companies, if they even, and many of them are operating illegally, if they even hint at that these are allowed for human consumption, they're operating illegally. Right there on the vial says not for human consumption. These research chemical companies, it's a loophole for these basically grifters and profiteers to sell a product that people know works and does wonders for people, and basically profit. A lot of the times it's not pure. Even if they say third-party testing, there's a dozen different ways to essentially claim that you've third-party tested and even provide those results, and the purity across the board might not be reflective of what's being displayed. And there's nobody to call them out on it. There's nobody that you can call to report them to. There's just no body to do that with. And so essentially, these research chemical companies, they actually are designed to sell these compounds, whether it's a peptide or a medication, to researchers. They're supposed to be used in vitro. They're supposed to be used in a test tube in a lab to basically be used in testing purposes. They know that people are buying these to inject them or take them.
Why else would they buy them?
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so it's just, I've heard horror stories. It's not worth risking. If you want to remove, if there's ever a chance of activating a cancer pathway, even theoretically, why even take on that risk?
Yeah.
You can simply avoid the risk by going to a doctor and getting a prescription and getting it from a pharmacy. It's just so much better to do that.
So is that the gold standard then of how do we buy peptides that are truly safe for us?
Yeah. So unfortunately, there's not too many options on the marketplace because frankly, a lot of doctors are afraid of these things, not because of harm that they've heard of, but because they just don't know. They don't know enough about them. They haven't done their research or due diligence because they're still relatively new. But if you just look, Chemistry 101, and if you just look at basically what these things are, you'll quickly find that they're safe by nature. It's telling your body to do things your body already knows how to do. It's not telling your body to do something new. And so finally, I think we're starting to see a wave of a group of providers who are actually more open-minded and starting to believe in these peptides as an alternative to basically traditional therapeutics.
It's a slippery slope though, because once the peptide efficacy increases and the standards increase, that's going to cause a lot of profit to go from one area, the ivory towers, over to the citizen scientist. How do you think that might play out?
I hope it plays out in the way where we take it from big pharmaceutical companies, of course. I think.
Do you see that happening?
Yeah, I definitely do. And I think Geviti is positioning ourselves in a way to actually allow that to happen. And I think other companies like ours are getting on board as well. We're a bit more forward thinking in some of the stuff that we offer. We offer a lot more peptides than other people do. We offer many of the growth hormones, secretagogues, of course, all the GLP-1s. We have things like SS31. We have 5-amino-1-MQ. There's a lot that we offer.
They sound like levels in a video game or something.
Yeah, they need better names.
BP157. It's almost like, you remember that movie Limitless with Bradley Cooper?
Yeah.
What was that? Like, it was like some number he took. NZT. That was it. So I feel like we're the player and the programmer at the same time. And I've mentioned this on some of our Liberated Life series. Like, we are literally creating our own reality, and we're shaping our own reality with our thought. this type of thinking that we're sharing at this table, and even, bless your father, because this is the fuel for what you do. And also just helping people avoid the suffering they don't need to suffer with from the medical system. All of this kind of coagulates. There's this confluence we're at right now. And I wonder how you feel about this. There's the traditional way we've been doing things for a long time, and we all feel the pain of that, and it's not working. Then there's the clear water coming in, in the Amazon where the water's mixed. And the clear water is like been washed by the rocks. It's been purified in a way. And it's this conscious capitalism coming to this fruition. I feel that when the water starts to mix from the new to the old, there's going to be a lot of pain, a lot of people that try to fight to have the new way not be the new way, to have the old way stay. I think that's just our human condition that we experience. What would be a dream scenario for you? In other words, if you had a magic wand and you were like, all right, I'm in control of this new water and this new path coming to fruition, what would it look like? What would it feel like? What would it sound like for healthcare in America?
Yes, good question. 2 words. I'd say democratization and even going so far as decentralization. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's look at, I'm going to shout out Strive Compounding Pharmacy right now. They are being sued by Eli Lilly, the people who make tirzepatide.
This is not surprising.
Not surprising.
Yeah.
And compounding pharmacies are amazing because what they allow is the democratization of necessary compounds, and they make them more accessible and affordable to people. And they're not price gouging, and you don't have to go through insurance to purchase them. You can cash pay them for a reasonable price.
Yes.
And then there's big pharmaceutical companies who patent medications and essentially when you patent a medication, a compounding pharmacy obviously cannot replicate it unless it's on a shortage list. And tirzepatide was on a shortage list for a while until we believe is sort of artificially removed from that list. And compounding pharmacies are no longer able to compound a 1-to-1 version of whatever compound that might be, in this case, tirzepatide. And so essentially, Eli Lilly came after Strive Compounding Pharmacy and Empower Pharmacy, 2 of the largest in the country. Strive is one of the fastest growing. We're close to their founders. Are actually right down the street from our headquarters. And what that is, it's not an attack on Strive or Empower. It's an attack on the democratization of accessible therapeutics. That's what it really comes down to. It's, hey, these people over here are threatening our profits. Everybody's going to go to these people over here because they're not hyperfixated on maximizing profits. They're hyperfixated on making things accessible and affordable. Let's sue them. And if you read the suit, there's like no merit. It's just to basically,
just to have
fear.
them litigate and spend millions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. That's all it really comes down to.
Yeah.
So we need more compounding pharmacies, good compounding pharmacies. Now, there's a lot of bad ones out there as well, and you need to be able to decipher. And I think we do a good job of educating people on how to decipher good versus bad, the various things to look at. But that's one component. Health information, right? So big companies own people's health information a lot of the times. And there needs to be a way in a perfect world where we can anonymize protected health information. So we can't basically correlate this person's blood work or genetic profile to this said individual. And if there was a way to do that at scale and almost decentralize health information into this universal database that people can basically all tap into, founders, creators, entrepreneurs, tech companies can tap into, that is how we basically live way, way, way longer. If we're all accessing the same high quality data source, rather than having to basically build a business, build your own database, or buy data from other people, the world would be a far more healthy place. There would be new drug inventions that are actually helpful, that don't have side effects every single day, if that was the case. And so that's a perfect world, and we don't live in a perfect world. In fact, I was just on a panel with a couple founders from some pretty large health tech companies, and one of the things was like, hey, we should all get together and we should figure out how to create this database of health information in a way that protects people. But that way, if our goal is to extend health span and as a byproduct extend lifespan, we need to come together and we need to share resources. Like you should be able to access the resources that we're gathering and vice versa.
Yeah.
But not at the expense of the individual. And so,
is there a way to make that data, this massive dream database, private, where each user would just be like, user from Texas, 44 years old, this weight, these biomarkers, without their name, anonymous data set?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that. But you wouldn't want it to be private. You would want it to be decentralized. You'd want it to be accessible to anybody and everybody ultimately, but you wouldn't want to be able to trace back who this
to
information.
The person. When do you think this might happen? When potentially could it happen?
Well, we have the technology to do it now. Blockchain technology allows that.
Yeah.
I mean, just think about like a decentralized currency, like a Bitcoin, right? Where we can all go in and you and I can go in and access a ledger and see all the transactions that have taken place on the Bitcoin blockchain since the inception of Bitcoin, right? That same idea, but as it relates to health information, where we can all basically go in and look and see basically what's there on a blockchain, something that can't be manipulated or refuted unless there was a consensus of people that all agreed that this was wrong. That is a better world, but I don't know if human nature will ever allow us to actually get there.
Why not?
Because human nature, I think, is unfortunately largely greedy. Even the best of us, the best of us, I think, have this unfortunate sort of desire sometimes to put self before others. And I think there's not enough people like yourself, I guess, at the top who really care about putting people before themselves.
I'm with you on human nature, actually, because I don't, Jordan Peterson said this once. He's like, instead of praying for peace or praying for happiness, pray for capacity and strength and resiliency. Mm-hmm. Because how you pray is a big deal, and words are spells. Like we've been spell casting on each other all afternoon here. We have to be very cautious. This is a warning. We have to be very cautious of the conversations that we hold and the people that we spend time with, because there's a lot of emotional osmosis going on with shared ideas. Mm. And I think it's really important when we look at scarcity-driven conversations versus abundance conversations in the health world. If you are feeling like someone is just doing it for the money, and they're just in it for them and their selfish gains, I think all of us have that built-in intuition to know. Mm-hmm. It's like you ever get around somebody and on paper they're perfect, and then you get around them and you're like, I just don't trust this dude. I don't know why, but there's something in my guts that makes me not trust them. I think we're all moving more towards that as a collective. I really do. And whether you're, a Christian faith or you just have some connection to your creator, I think that's where that intuition comes from.
Yeah, I think the biblical principle for that would be testing the spirits. What I like to call it is a BS sniffer.
Yeah,
I think everybody has a built-in BS sniffer.
But it gets blunted by modernity.
It definitely does. Not everybody's as in tune with it. Some people are acclaimed to have, better intuition than others. Yeah. But maybe that's not necessarily true. Maybe you've just put on blinders throughout your life for various reasons, maybe reasons that weren't basically caused by you, and sort of your judgment or intuition has become clouded. But we all have a BS sniffer for sure.
Yeah.
We've just got to be, I think also the flip of that is humans trust too easily as well. And so it's easy to sell somebody, on something. Essentially, people are just inclined to trust and say yes, especially when you can present, if you sell a problem and then offer a solution, people are going to buy it. And it's just this manipulative tactic that can be used for good, but oftentimes it's not used for good. And so you have to figure out, how can I decipher whether or not this is actually good or whether or not this is snake oil.
Yeah.
And so that's where, unfortunately, not everybody has a great BS sniffer. I try to get in front of as many people as I can to tell my story and talk about why we're doing this so people can come to their own conclusions.
Right.
And I think more founders should do that as well. That way, who the person is that's actually behind all of this.
We don't do ads. We don't just read ads. I stopped doing that. We only do real partnership and collaboration with people that I really feel are doing good. And it only happens through storytelling. If you look at how we grew up for millennia, we would sit around the fire and tell stories, and we would get to know each other. And that's what podcasting really is. It's just like this global fire that we're sitting around, having these long form conversations that stick to your soul, because you can actually feel someone. I think before we recorded, we were talking with you and your team, and I'm like, well, after a decade, I've seen a lot of people come and go. It's like the truth eventually bubbles to the surface. Mm-hmm. And I think you can judge not a man by his character, but just a human being by his character over time. Mm-hmm. There's a lot, like look what happened with Theranos, right? Or even 23andMe and the data breach. Like I think what happens with our intuition is we've got to be more patient with it developing its certainty. I think we're living in a world of like snap decisions and 15-second reels, and we're being trained, y'all. I'm not here to bring fear to your heart, but like we're being trained in a very big way. And so I wonder with your company and even building it, in the past 5 years, it seems like, have you had a moment where your BS sniffer was clouded and you got taken advantage of and you learned something about you yourself as a person to increase your own intuition?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
How so?
Many times. Just bad partnerships.
Mm-hmm. You saw the best in them, but you didn't see the red flag?
For sure. Or there was a red flag, but maybe it's a one-off case. And then it keeps happening and it keeps happening. And then it's not a one-off case. And then it's like, oh my goodness, like should have made this decision earlier when the red flag made itself known. Mm. And then you start just, what's funny is anytime I've been in one of those situations, initially I had this gut feeling. And I think by this point, I have just learned to trust my gut, whether it's right or wrong. It's just, for me, it's better practice to trust my gut rather than take a chance. If my gut even gives me the slightest, feeling of uncertainty, I'm just going to avoid that. No partner, no buddy is necessarily like end all be all for Geviti. It's not, we're not reliant on anybody. And there's a lot of people out there that are very talented and can do really, really cool things with us. And so trusting my gut is, I think, ultimately just how I operate now. And I'm sure there's been times where I've trusted my gut and maybe it wasn't my gut. Maybe I did make the wrong decision, but at least I can sleep knowing that I'm operating in a consistent fashion. I'm not saying yes sometimes, saying no other times. It's consistent because it's bound to basically that same feeling that I get every single time, the BS sniffer goes off. So trusting my gut.
What about that same BS sniffer when it comes to peptides and supplements? Like, did you initially, has there been a peptide or a supplement where you're like, I saw just the good in it, and then I realized that it's probably not doing what it says it's doing? Have you had that happen from a supplement or peptide side?
I can't say that we have, to be honest. We don't guess. We just look at the data. And if the data suggests that it's not working across the board, we'll cease to offer it. Now, however, the flip of that is some things work tremendously well for one person and just don't work at all for others. And so there's been moments where it's like, ooh, this compound that we're offering doesn't seem to be working. And then one of our members has a tremendous response to it. And then we're like, okay, we've got to assess as to why this is. And the literature doesn't suggest anything. So we've kind of got to do our own analysis and see why it might be working for person A, but not person B. And that's really cool because in modern day, we actually almost have this ability to run our own internal studies. We don't have to be reliant on third-party studies, which is really, really cool because those take a long time. They cost a lot of money. And to be honest, I'm not necessarily convinced that you should trust a lot of them. A lot of them are funded by pharmaceutical companies and others who have a vested interest in the outcomes going a certain way. And so through the ability of accessible diagnostics, you can essentially be your own lab rat, if you will, and run studies on yourself. Now, of course, we don't necessarily suggest just taking everything and seeing how you react to it. But
yeah, because then you wouldn't know which one was working. Right. If you're doing 5 things at once.
For sure. And so it's just really cool that we no longer have to be totally reliant on third-party data. We can actually go in and see how it's affecting you as an individual. And what we've actually found just with our sample size, without getting too specific, is basically the response to certain compounds that we have at Geviti might be higher than maybe or better than what the literature actually suggests that they should be. And so it's just super interesting. It just kind of goes to show that studies are definitely not the end all be all. They're a great place to start and they're a great reference point. But I think we're going to see going forward this trend towards companies like Geviti starting to publish data and basically conduct our own internal studies, of course, assuming members opt in for it. We wouldn't do this without telling anybody or asking them.
Yeah.
And I think that's very, very important. Essentially, what we're doing is we're removing a lot of the qualms I think that I have with the way these studies are ran and how they're funded by essentially just cutting through all of it and doing it ourselves.
You're holding two worlds. Like on one side, there's a data set. And on the other side, there's people. Like these numbers and these records are human beings. So it's like, I know we've talked a lot about technology because it's so important and so fascinating. I have such an optimistic view of technology. It's just like, I can see it for what it is. Now, with this being real people, has there been one story? There's probably been hundreds, maybe thousands of people that have written in. I even saw on your website, there was like an airline pilot who was like, my life has changed. These can't be faked. Real testimonials are a testimonial to what they've experienced. Is there a testimonial, or is there, one that really touched your heart? Maybe even made you cry, made you emotional. Like, what's the juice on that for you? I'm sure you get them every day, every week. Has there been one where you're like, wow, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing?
Yeah. At this point, we've been able to help people find cancer, people who are on the verge of cardiovascular disease. We've had, obviously, I can't disclose who this person is.
Yeah.
But through
we'll
our
call
blood
him
work,
John Doe.
Yeah, John Doe, through our blood work, was able to find out that he had blood cancer. And luckily, he found out and is able to install preventative and proactive measures to essentially have a normal lifespan. It's hardly going to affect his lifespan. And that's what this is all about. Today, for example, somebody on our Instagram tagged us. They did a story post of them getting their blood drawn, and their daughter was sitting in their lap. And that is why Geviti exists as well. I like to build the product around my wife. My wife is at home right now with my two boys, and we have a almost 3-year-old, and he is crazy as all can be. And he's so sweet, but he's also very crazy. He's a lot. He's messy.
Oh yeah. My son's 4. He just like Hulk smashes everything.
Yep. There's you just got to learn to live in a mess essentially at this stage.
Yes.
And so, and then she's nurturing a 4-month-old as well. So we're fresh into it, and she doesn't have time to go to a functional medicine doctor or go to a lab to get her blood work done and, put the kids in a car seat and schedule the appointment, then go back to have the follow-up. She doesn't have time for any of that. I don't have time for any of that either as a busy professional, as a CEO and co-founder of a health tech company. I'm in the office way too long. And so what's really cool is it doesn't have to be that way anymore. A phlebotomist can come out to you and draw your blood, and then you can have your review on your phone through our application and any follow-ups. And you never have to go to a pharmacy. You never have to go pick anything up or go anywhere for that matter.
Yeah.
It's all completely remote and digital. And it's really cool that we live in a day and age where that's accessible, and it doesn't affect the quality of care in a negative way. In fact, it enhances it in a lot of ways. And so I think that it's not only in our best interest, but in the best interest of people to design the product in a way that supports busy mothers who are at home alone with the kids, and then people like ourselves who are, building something as well.
I
or
love
busy
that,
professionals, blue collar people too.
I love that you base it around the mother. That's so good. This is like the ancient wisdom. We've had so many metaphysical teachers on the podcast. I know this has been more of a technology health conversation, but still part of the Pentagon. It's still really essential. We can't have one without the other is what I'm saying. And all of the great masters and, multi best-selling authors that have sat here, that have written books, they all say a portion of what you just said. They design everything they do around the mother and the family because that's so important. And we live in a society that's trying to make women men and men women. And it's just insanity. It's kind of this demonic energy that I understand why it's there. We're all in a big story here. So I'm doing my best to not be in judgment of it. But the final question is this. The soup that we're swimming in, which is this soup where there's the players from the ivory tower and pharma and medicine. And then there's the other part of the soup where you and I are swimming in. Do you see a world in your lifetime before you pass. Maybe you live to 100. Great. Maybe you live to more. Who knows what technology is coming, especially with your health tech and what's out there. Who knows? You could live beyond 100. Do you see in your lifetime that there will be a world where we flip the suffering curve on its head? I don't think we ever get out of here without suffering. I think our Creator actually gives us suffering as lessons for growth.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see a world where instead of 80% suffering, 20% joy? Can we flip that in our lifetime, in your lifetime?
Yeah, I think we can. I think when we do, it's going to be close to the end. I think that's Icarus flying too close to the sun at that point. Just based on my worldview. But a couple things. One, yes, you're going to live well beyond 100. I believe within 5 years you'll have an AI doctor. I think you'll live into your 120s, 130s, 140s. I think that'll be completely normal. I think science validates that. Technology is just causing additional momentum to support longevity science as well. And so that's really cool. And so if you just look at the charts, the graphs, the growth rate in certain research and technologies, it is all kind of leading to the same place, which is a rapidly extending lifespan. And that's really, really cool. To your point though, or to your question, yeah, I think that artificial intelligence is going to create abundance for a lot of people. I think ultimately it's going to drive down the costs of goods and services across the board, and in turn make things accessible. What is super accessible here in America, I think will now be accessible to even third world countries. I think there will be sort of this almost leveling of the playing field that will take place that might hurt some people's egos, but that's totally fine. It'll create abundance for everyone else who doesn't already have it, and make it accessible and affordable as well. So I think that's a byproduct of artificial intelligence. And I think we're starting to see that even in businesses, which, it kind of all starts at the business level. Our costs have gone down with artificial intelligence, all things considered. We no longer have to hire as many junior engineers because a solid engineer plus an AI co-pilot is just as good as a senior engineer plus a junior engineer, sometimes even better. And so you no longer have to pay a $130,000 to $150,000 a year salary because AI can perform that task. Same thing with customer support. AI is going to make its way into a lot of different segments in the workforce, which might displace or at least augment people's jobs immediately. They'll find a place. People are resilient, and you're not just not going to find something.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it'll be a net good. Things will become more affordable. And what we're talking about, this AI doctor, there's going to be a continuity in healthcare across the board. The same sort of technology that I'm utilizing, somebody in Africa will be able to utilize that same technology. Somebody who today currently could not access the technology that Geviti offers people here in America. I think that's all going to change here really, really fast. And so we have the means, we have the technology, we have the funding. It's about, will the people who really pull on the strings at the top, will they allow it? And even if they don't allow it, how long will it take for the people to basically make it happen?
To just grab the fucking strings back.
Right.
That's really what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Of course.
And so I think it'll happen. But by that time, I don't know where we'll be. It's
going to be an interesting show.
Yeah.
This has been an interesting show. For me, the reason this is one of my favorites, and I know y'all feel this, is because we are at this nexus. We're at this confluence that I talked about. And I do believe that it's a war of sorts. It's a war of good and evil. It's a war of dark and light. And the only way out is through. It's a platitude that we've heard so many times in all religious texts, actually. It's been really compelling. Thank you for coming on the show, man.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
It's been awesome. I've really enjoyed, especially, and age doesn't matter. I think wisdom skips generations, with your youth and what's happened for you and the honor to your family and your father. It's a testament. It's a testament to the human spirit. You could have chosen to just go make money in Silicon Valley, but you chose this.
Yeah. It's totally mission driven. Something you said earlier, just to touch on one last thing, if you don't mind.
Touch it.
you had mentioned something to the effect of nature knows best. And that's super true. That's super true. We're starting to see the sort of emergence of stem cells, specifically like MSCs, right? MSC IVs becoming more and more popular, mesenchymal stem cells, which are stem cells derived from a few different places. They can be derived from fat. They can be derived from your teeth. They can be derived from umbilical cord blood, other places as well. And so what's really, really cool about MSCs, and we're offering MSC IVs here at Geviti soon as well. We actually got together with, her name's Dr. Joy Kong. She's the stem cell doctor of the decade. She's awesome. She has a practice out of LA. She's an advisor to Geviti on the medical side, to basically co-create a first of its kind using her methodology at-home stem cell IV product. And we're using mesenchymal stem cells derived from umbilical cord blood, and no controversy, no embryos. They're all, it's all from a maternal birth that took place. And we even go as far, the mother has to sign off that she didn't get the COVID-19 vaccine. That's how far we go.
Amazing.
When we source these stem cells. And so totally ethically sourced. But what's really cool about them is we're recycling what would have otherwise been just waste. It would have just been thrown in a trash can and not used, these stem cells. And they're almost like similar to peptides messengers. If you view your body as an organization, the MSCs, these stem cells, are almost like the CEO coming in on a parachute to put out fires. So they're not going to necessarily be the ones doing the tasks. They're going to be sending memos and making calls and coordinating. They're going to be telling the cells to go over here and do some repair on this tissue, or basically get these immune cells at bay over here. And so it's really cool because when you do an MSC IV, you don't necessarily know exactly what's going to happen, in the sense that you don't know what's going to be healed, because a lot of the time you don't even know what needs healing. There's stuff that's happening inside that is off a lot of the time that you just are going through life not knowing about. So these MSCs, when you do a MSC IV, it's going to, at a systemic level, essentially find out where in your body needs healing, and it's going to go to those areas on its own. And there's specific receptors that there's things in your body that are released whenever there's inflammation. And so it's drawn to that, and it finds those areas. And it goes to them and it performs, it gives it specific memos, specific messages to perform healing. And that's really cool because this isn't some manufactured product that a big pharmaceutical company made. This is potentially the most powerful therapeutic that we know about in existence as it relates to longevity. Stem cells, mesenchymal stem cells. And it's completely natural. It already exists in nature. And forever, we've just been throwing them away. And now we know we can actually use them to heal people. We've had, Dr. Kong has one story that I just want to tell really quick. She had this person who his liver was failing and he was put in hospice. He didn't qualify for a liver transplant because he was an IV drug user. And if you're an IV drug user, you don't qualify for a liver transplant. And so he was told he was going to die. He's put in hospice as a last resort effort. He gathered all of his funds, went to Dr. Kong, one stem cell IV, leaves the clinic. Dr. Kong isn't necessarily sure what happened. Months go by. She's on a radio show. And the brother of that person calls in and is like, hey, Dr. Kong, you saved my brother's life. But not only did you save my brother's life, he has no elevated liver markers. His liver is completely fine now. And it's just like her mind was blown because this was earlier on in her career. And this was one of those just like healing moments that she experienced where it's like, I need to dedicate my life to this. And since then, she's dedicated her life towards stem cells, and she's the place to go in America. Now, luckily, will be a solution that will bring it to you.
How do you make that affordable?
That's the thing. There's only so many Dr. Kongs to go around,
There's only
right?
so many babies as well.
Yeah,
mothers.
there's only some, there are, but babies are happening, are being born every single day. And most of the time we're just disposing of the umbilical cord blood. And
That's a whole
all that
podcast
stuff.
on its own, man. I'm not about that.
Yeah.
I think that's a very sacred organ.
Yeah. Yep. So it's people are disposing of it, just putting it in the trash can.
It's so disgusting.
Yep. And so there's never been an issue in like, oh, we can't source enough Wharton jelly or mesenchymal stem cells.
Okay, so the supply is there.
Supply is there. It's just they're expensive because for a couple reasons. Primarily, there's not enough good doctors out there to actually see everybody. And so by default, if there's increasing demand for a product, but not enough of you to go around, you have to increase your prices.
This sounds like a holy grail of extension of longevity, this MSCs.
It is. Peptides plus MSCs, we believe at Geviti, are the future of longevity. I think these are two therapeutics that will get us to living into our hundreds, well into our hundreds. And there's data across the world, not just here in America, but across the world being done on studies being done on mesenchymal stem cells that support this as well. People already know that they're great for neurodegenerative diseases and other autoimmune issues and various issues. But now they're starting to be used as a preventative and proactive therapeutic to essentially ensure that your body is in this nearly perpetual state of healed, not healing, but healed. And so if you have the means, you should definitely consider looking into an MSC IV. If you go some places, they'll charge as much as $50,000 for one, which is just ridiculous. Most people don't have those sort of resources. So what we're trying to do is get them down to between a $5,000 to $8,000 price point, but delivering it to your home and maybe adding on some financing options to that to make it more digestible.
Because you don't need multiple doses of this, right?
No.
How many doses do you really need?
Well, it depends on the person, right? If they're coming in with a lot of issues, autoimmune or whatever that might be, if they're older, if they're larger, weight plays into things. So totally dose dependent, depending on the individual, in their needs and what they have going on already. But as a preventative therapeutic, once a year, if you can, twice a year, but once a year is like a pretty good baseline.
Yeah.
And with Geviti, you'll just be able to go to your application and order one up. But then exosomes are really cool, and we're pairing that on top of the MSCs, and that's also becoming popular as well. So
how do you feel like that price will eventually come down?
Our goal is to get it so we're just a few $1,000s. The pricing, a lot of stuff has to happen for the pricing to come down further. We have RFK Jr., head of the HHS. He's been outspoken on things like stem cells and peptides for a long time and how the FDA suppresses these things. Why? Because they work. And now that he's the head of the HHS, he's got a lot of tape that he has to cut through. And if he can cut through a lot of that tape, the pricing on a lot of these therapeutics across the board will come down. But there's a lot of people at the HHS who are legacy medicine people who just don't like the new leadership and are not going to make it easy for him to do so. So, we got to be supportive of his battle there, I think.
Well, all the big trees in the forest eventually fall over and then new trees grow. I think that's where we're at in the conversation. What an exceptional podcast. I really enjoyed this. Thank you for coming on. It's on the screen, y'all. It's not cheap. It's not easy to run a company like yours. So the link, the code, Josh20, 20% off your first membership, which is amazing, right? Margins make the world run so much. And gosh, the fact that we get to have discounts is so amazing because money is energy and many people are on a limited supply of energy. So thanks for being my guest. Thanks for the hookup. Thanks for being in partnership. I'm fully behind you guys. I believe in what you're doing, especially now meeting you and hearing your story. I'm just a full yes to your mission.
I appreciate it. It's amazing. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're so welcome. All right, y'all, share this podcast with somebody who's suffering, for Christ's sake. Like, we do not have to suffer so much. The technology is out there. And this technology, this health technology, it is so potent, so powerful. But you have to have an open mind and an open heart so you can have a better body. So share this podcast with somebody that's been suffering that may be open or might be an incredible conversation for you to have with your mom, your dad, your brother, your neighbor, someone who you would like to ease the suffering for. So until we see you again, I'm wishing you love, wellness, but most importantly, peace and power. You cannot have true power unless it comes from peace. I'll talk to you soon.